If one was to study the changes that have occurred on the landscape of Europe and the world in the last 50 years, then I could point out many, many, many differences. But tell me to point out the differences in the last 10 years, from 1963 to 1973, then it gets complicated. You see, in many respects, the world is pretty much the same, and yet in other respects, it has changed so much that Hitler will not be able to recognize it. But let me just dive deep into the subject. So, we all know it. Hitler died in 1963 and was succeeded as Führer by Martin Bormann. Recently, Bormann has been in the news a lot as he has led what many rumor to be a second night of the long knives, a brutal purge of everyone inside the Reich who opposes Bormann's orthodox National Socialism. Under Bormann, Germany follows many of Hitler's teachings while also applying some of Bormann's own methods. The party bureaucracy is one of the foremost of Bormann's inspirations. In that regard, Bormann is quite similar with his arch nemesis or the arch nemesis of National Socialism, the USSR, in that under Martin Bormann, the Nazi state has shifted from a totalitarian state under Hitler to a bureaucratic Nazi dictatorship under Martin Bormann. In the East, Bormann has created a Reich protectorate in Poland led by Albert Foster. Of course, there are dogs barking behind me. But where aren't there dogs? And history is best studied with dogs. In Moscow, the pathetic military administration continues under Walter Wenck. Even after so many years, the Nazis have still not found any answer to the question of what to do with this huge territory, and Caucasian continues to be nothing but a resource creating cash cow for the National Socialist Reich. Reichskommissariat Ukraine is led by Otto Ollendorf. After a tense showdown between the reformists, the orthodoxes, and the hardliners, Otto Ollendorf and his SS came to power in Reichskommissariat Ukraine. Ollendorf's vision for Ukraine is simple. If the perfect Aryan paradise is to be created, then there must be rule of the iron fist. The decaying party must be destroyed, and in its place a perfect clockwork mechanism under Ollendorf himself should be created. Meanwhile, the Italians have lost much of their empire, at least in the Arab world, but we shall come to that later. In Italy, Scorza was unable to retain his mandate after the loss of much of the Middle East. To the horror and surprise of many, General Edgardo Sogno led a daring coup against Scorza in 1972 and restored the king as the paramount power, in what can only be called Italy's Meiji Restoration. Italy remains an adamant power of its own, away from the Einheitspacht or the Die Kirchen or the Organization of Free Nations. Switzerland and Pact Commission Frankreich are two puppet states. No, one is a puppet state and one is a Nazi allying state, let's just say. In Britain, dark is the mist. A thick rain fog has fallen all over the British Isles, because under Gerald Wallop and his Goth king and country, the fascists have taken power. Unlike Mosley's young guard of the fascists, the old guards under Gerhard Wallop want to restore what they called the old imperialist past of Britain, when Britain was an empire to be feared, a glory of its own. But of what importance is that when the British continue to be in cahoots with the Nazis? The French are not very different. Pierre Puget rejected Philippe Pétain's idiosyncratic rule, or the technocrats, or even the radical Nazis. Puget wants a return to the traditionalist clerical past, a past where the Judeo Masonic bankers do not dominate business, a past where even the little man is well protected and France is a great power. But once again, France today is a shadow of its former self. But in Spain and Portugal, a new kind of power has arisen. The radical phalangists under Jaime Milans del Bosch. Coming to power in the Spanish Civil War, Jaime Milans del Bosch is a hardline national syndicalist fascist. He rejects Franco's moderate policies. No, he wants an ultra-Catholic, ultra-national syndicalist version of government, more closer to Mussolini's San Sepolcrismo, and at the same time also being a sort of Catholic theocracy with one single leader at the top. That means Del Bosch himself. Then the Balkans, most states continue to be either in the Nazi Empire or non-aligned. The Hungarians under István Horthy and his populist agrarian rhetoric, and the Romanians under Ion Ratiu and once again his populist agrarianist rhetoric are in the Nazi sphere of influence. So are the Serbs. Serbia is led by Borivoje Jonik. Jonik is a very simple kind of dictator, a patriotic, God-fearing policeman, a clerical fascist, a man who crushes all opposition under his boot. That's who Jonik is. Under one single Catholic cross and also the twisted cross of National Socialism, Serbia burns. Meanwhile, the Kingdom of Croatia and the Kingdom of Montenegro are in the Italian sphere of influence, while Albania is directly a part of Italy. Bulgaria is under the Tsar. In the 1960s, the Tsar finally managed to achieve what his father had been unable to do: total control over not only the state but also the government apparatus. In Greece, Georgios Paulos came to power after his own coup d'etat in 1971. He is an ultra-militarist. Paulos wants the Megali idea and he will settle for nothing else. But until it is achieved, he shall brutally purge all the communists and the Democrats and everyone else who opposes his rule. The dogs are barking again, and they remind me so much of Scandinavia. For in Scandinavia, people have refused to be Nazi dogs. Except for the Danes, that is. The Danes continue to be puppet state of the National Socialists. But the Norwegians have broken free from Germany's grasp, and Bohman has not shown a willingness to lead yet another invasion against fellow Aryans. The Norwegians are now led by Einar Gerhardsen, while King Olav V has been restored through his throne. Norway is a shining example of democracy in a pit of National Socialist locusts. The Kingdom of Denmark and the Republic of Finland are both democracies. And then we come to Russia. In 1963, Russia was a divided wasteland, divided among numerous warlords. But alas, even in 1973, it still continues to be the same. Beginning from west to east, there are various warlords who have failed to achieve total control over Russia, as was expected by various international observers. Vladimir Kirpichenkov's Onega is a standard anti-communist band of military men. Mikhail Antipin meanwhile leads an orthodox theocracy, the Order of St. George. There are some other smaller warlord states, like the Zlatoust Republic, which is mainly made up of gun runners, and the thief territory of Yugra, which is led by Jaba Yoseliani. Huh? I don't even know who he is. I mean, the last I heard from Russia, this man was basically a prisoner who managed to get out of Vorkuta and that's it. God knows what sort of warlord state he's leading. The most well known Russian statesman today is Alexander Pokishin. Alexander Pokishin leads the Central Siberian Federation, the only government recognized by Germany, Japan, and USA even in an unofficial degree. It is just your standard oligarchy. Meanwhile, further east in Siberia, after the death of Alexander Men, the divine mandate of Siberia fell to its own warlord states, from communists to dictators to various fascists and other warlords. The dream of Alexander Men is gone and buried in the dust. A weak little warlord state in the Siberian wasteland is led by Gleb Yakunin, but Father Yakunin can hardly claim what Alexander Men had claimed, the hearts and minds of the people of Siberia. Now we come to the Middle East, the grand chalice of them all. In the Middle East, the Turks are led by Salal Bayar, who is a liberal conservative Ittihadist. Unlike Kemalism, Salal Bayar believes in a free economy and social conservatism, an alliance with Islam instead of Kemal Pasha's secularism. But in the Arabic lands, the situation is different. The Saudis and the Jordanians and the Yemenis are the three traditional monarchies, but they are surrounded on all sides by the United Arab Republic, a Ba'athist coalition made up of Gamal Abdel Nasser, Mitchell Aflaq in Syria, Ahmed Hassan al-Bakr in Iraq, and Laila Fakhro in Oman. The Baathists want a new republican future for the Arab world, a future which is not led by traditionalist Muslims or the sultans of old. In Jerusalem, a two-state solution finally brought lasting peace to the region. Yasser Arafat leads Palestine while Golda Meir's Labour Zionists lead Israel. The Lebanese Republic is led by Camille Chamoun's National Liberals. But further east, the socialists have triumphed in Iran. They have overthrown the German-supported monarchists and the Japanese-supported Islamists under Khomeini. Iran is now an isolated pariah state. It has no friends, not in Germany, not in Tokyo, not in Washington, D.C. And even the Arabs and the Turks and the Afghans, all of them hate Iran. But Iran stands strong under Iraj Iskandari's Bolshevists. The only ally that the Iranians really have is the Socialist Republic of Kazakhstan. But between the Socialist Federation of Iran and the Socialist Republic of Kazakhstan lies the Turkmen Republic and the Bukharan People's Soviet and the Turkestan Legion, a legion which represents the long arm of Germania in Central Asia, led by the mercenary Sher Mohammad Korsirmat. The Turkestan Legion is vehemently pro-German and claims to be fascist in name, although not in structure. Further east lies the great power of Japan. Many claim that the Germans have won the Kalter Krieg, while the Japanese come a close second. In the late 1960s, the Japanese, under Prime Minister Ikeda Masanosuke, signed a treaty with President Lyndon Johnson, wherein the ports of San Jose, Oakland, and San Francisco were returned back to the Americans in return for certain treaties. Lyndon Johnson was succeeded as president by Henry M. Jackson. Unlike the moderate Johnson, Jackson is a war hawk. He wants a radical war. Maybe not a hot war, but at least an ideological war against fascists and Nazis of all kinds. Meanwhile, his counterpart in Tokyo is more astute. Ikeda Masanosuke is neither a radical nor a moderate. He has himself lived in fear of conservatives, liberals, and independence for all his life. He is a political scientist by formation, a man who has absolute control over the state, the army, and the bureaucracy, and that's all that matters. For ideology is just a word. The state of Manchuria, meanwhile, is completely under the control of the Japanese reform bureaucracy, the Somucho, under Gu Chicheng. The Somucho have turned Manchuria into the perfect colonial state of Japan, which they manage like clockwork. In China, the dream of China is dead. China has perished. After Long Yun's victory over the Chinese government, the Japanese launched an all-out assault on China itself. In the resulting battle, 1 million lives were lost, but the Japanese finally destroyed China, this time forever. Now the North China Political Council is led by Yang Yintai and his corporatists. In Guangdong, similarly, the age of corporations is gone. Komai Kenichiro rules Guangdong. He is a man who commands respect, and he wants to transform Guangdong into a symbol of industrial success. But the old days of grandeur and neon are gone. Now the state is one of steel and sweat, a state of Hitachi, a state that is inspired from the perfect colony known as Japanese Manchuria. There are some other warlords like the Shikoku Homingun under Suji Masanobu, a war-hungry ultra-militarist warlord, or the Tibetans, or the Xinjiang People's Border Defense Administration, and of course the Mongolian government of Mengjiang. The Japanese sphere is completed by some other countries, like the Republic of Vietnam, the Republic of Laos, which recently threw out their king, the Kingdom of Kampuchea under King Norodom Sihanouk, who is a staunch centrist, the Republic of Thailand under Prahas Charusatien, who came to power after the death of his predecessor and has launched brutal purges to make Thailand a perfect dictatorship inspired from Nazi Germany. Then we have the Union of Burma under Aung San and the Azad Hind government under Mohan Singh. Mohan Singh is closer to the ideals of Bose than Lakshmi Sehgal or the moderate Democrats. He hates Lal Bahadur Shastri of the Republic of India, for he believes that the Republic of India is a corrupt bureaucratic nightmare inspired by Jawaharlal Nehru. Further west, we have the Kingdom of Afghanistan under the centrist King Mohammad Zahir Shah and led by a conservative Prime Minister, Hussein Mandialwal. And of course, we have the Little Khanate of Kalak, the Baluchi Liberation Front, which has achieved independence hand in hand with the Socialists, and the League of Arab Sheikdoms under Shahbud bin Sultan Al Nahyan. Further south, we have Indonesia, which achieved its democracy and its independence from Japanese rule under Muhammad Hatta after the decade-long Indonesian Civil War. But some others, like the Filipinos, continue to be under Japanese occupation. After the victory of the Philippine Independence Army in the Philippines Civil War, the Japanese launched an assault on the Philippines. In an eerie precursor of the Japanese attack on China, the Japanese put Philippines under army rule of Takayama Shinobu. Now, Philippines is a perfect colony of Japan. Australia continues to be classical liberal and New Zealand is a strong conservative democracy, while Canada is under Robert Stanfield and the Tories. Nothing really new about that. Mexico again is ruled by the PRI, which continues to dominate Mexico since the 1920s. In Nicaragua, it's more of the same. Luis Somoza Debayle, the Somoza family, keeps ruling Nicaragua, and there is no indication of them ever not doing so. But in Cuba, there was a radical revolution under Fidel Castro and his Partido Vanguardia Unidad de la Revolución Cubana. He is inspired by Jorge Eliacar Gaitan of Venezuela and Colombia. Haiti continues to be under Jacques Stefan Alexis and its Pan Africanists who wish to have a sort of African cultural renaissance in the New World. Then the Dominican Republic is led by Joaquim Balaguer. The old dictatorship of Trujillo is gone. In Guadeloupe, there was a revolution under Marcel Gagar, and in Trinidad and Tobago, there was a Black Power revolution under Makanlal Daga, who is a leftist trade union activist. And now we come to the Catholic state of New Granada, the intersection of statecraft with religion. The National Catholics believe that Colombia can be great again if, you guessed it, if radical Catholicism is strong. Guess who this reminds you of, kids? Venezuela is a democracy under Romulo Betancourt. Ecuador is under a military junta led by Marcos Gandara Enriquez. Peru is under Manuel Arturo Odria, a warlord who had previously been an idiosyncratic dictator of Peru in the 1940s, then went into exile, and now he has come back to lead Peru. Bolivia is under Hugo Banzer. The Banzerato is a radical Nazi-inspired dictatorship. But in Colombia there was a revolution led by the charismatic Che Guevara. Che Guevara, against all odds, defeated Argentina, Bolivia, and Brazil. And after that, Che disappeared to lead some other guerrilla campaign, placing Miguel Angel Soler and his communists at the power in Asuncion. Chile is under Robert Viox and his revolutionary nationalist military junta. Unlike the other juntas of Latin America, Robert Viox wants a more hardline junta, a junta where the economy is not open to American capitalist dogs, but where the people go hand in hand with the military, a corporatist government, a national syndicalist mode of economy. Argentina and Uruguay are democracies, and so is Brazil. The Partido Socialista Democrática, the Partido Sociale Democrática continues to lead Brazil, and the PTB, the Partido Trabalhista Brasileira, the more socialist wing of the Vargas party, has not managed to win a single election throughout the 1960s. And then, of course, we come to Africa, a land where the French have been kicked out to a small freezing island near Antarctica. Kicked out by the revolutionaries of the West African Union, led by Felix Roland Momi and Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana. They have managed to succeed even in Liberia, fighting against American mercenaries to place an African socialist ruler in Liberia and all over West Africa. They are only opposed by Azawad under Bey Ag Ahmok and the monarchy of Ayer under Ibrahim ibn Umaru, and also the Kanem under Hissene Habre. Meanwhile, Ethiopia continues to be a colony of the Italians, producing much needed raw materials. After the death of Hans Huttig, the Wehrstaat of Africa was completely destroyed and divided up into various African warlords, some of them charismatic, but a lot of them nothing more than bloodthirsty brutalists. Chief among them is the esoteric ultranationalist John Okello and the bandit cannibal warlord Christopher Gibinyi. Some of them, however, are more stable-minded than the others, like Mishake Muyungo of Barotesland, Jonas Savimbi of Angola, and most importantly Seretse Khama of Botswana, who is the most economically successful out of all the warlords that came after the collapse of Huttig's evil empire. but some continue to hold on to the old days, like the Abteilung Ostafrika under Schrader's clique. He leads a pseudo colony of the Germans, trading in arms, drugs, and any raw material and weapons that he can find, ruling Bohel-Lerstadt as his perfect fiefdom. The Malagasy Republic had a revolution under Joseph Rosetta and his national communists of the FEPIMA. Meanwhile, in the Afrikaner Volksstaat, P.W. Botha succeeded Verwoerd and continues the policies of apartheid that are inspired by Nazi Germany. And that is the world of today. A world where the Germans seem dominant, so do the Japanese. A world where the Africanists have kicked out the French, and also a world where the light of socialism continues to shine bright in some parts. And then, of course, we have the weakened organization of free nations under the nascent American Republic. Only time will tell what happens by 1983.